You know what it's about. Or do you? You know what it's about. Do you? You do. Welcome to Strip Club, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I am Adrian Ford, and we are here for what I believe is the 23rd or 24th video in the short story by short story read along for Ernest Hemingway's Finca Vigia edition. This will appear in the Ernest Hemingway read along as well as the short story playlist. Now, here's what I have to set the table up with before we get into the what happened recap, before we get to the literary criticisms, and before we get to the writer's corner portion of this video. This must be the fourth or fifth time I've gone over this short story on this channel. So I want to, in the read-along video for Ernest Hemingway, talk about a couple of extra things as opposed to, or in difference with, the things that we normally talk about while talking about Hills Like White Elephants by Ernest Hemingway. So there's a couple other things sort of worked into this to make it different than most of the discussions that I've done on this short story, though really you could read this short story every day for a month and come out with different talking points. So, what happened in this short story? The American and the girl, Jig, are at a bar in a train stop between Barcelona and Madrid. They each get a beer. They each get an Anise del Toro. Then, the disagreements start. After liquor, who would have thought, starts fighting. Despite each of them claiming to be having a fine time, they fight anyway. She's upset and says that all they do is look at things and try new drinks. So they each get another beer. And he starts telling her about the operation and how simple it really is. They just let the air in, he says. She asks then, hold on, I don't know what I wrote here. She asks and then says she'll be all right after that's the only thing. Oh, right. I can't read my own handwriting sometimes. She says, I'll go through with it because that's the only thing that is keeping us upset with each other, and afterwards we'll all be happy. They argue a bit more after that, and she says she'll do it because she doesn't care about her. Then she gets up, walks across the station, and starts looking at the landscape. She says the world isn't theirs anymore, and once you lose it, you don't get it back. You'll never get it back, she says. Then she wants another beer, and she wants to stop talking. And that's kind of where the story stops. The story doesn't end as much as it stops. And that leads me into point number one here under the literary criticism portion of this video. One thing that is difficult for me to believe is that apparently, not only was this short story turned down multiple times when Hemingway tried to get it published, that's kind of believable. Many good stories have that behind them. You get it to the wrong editor at the wrong time, you're not going to get a yes. One thing that is difficult for me to believe that it wasn't until the last 30 years or so, and this short story was published in 1927, so nearly 100 years, it's only the last 30 years or so that this was considered one of Hemingway's best. Before, this was considered something of a fragmentary story, something that wasn't an entire encapsulation of a story, but it was just a sketch. It was something that was not complete. It was not whole. This is one of the things that is troubling about moving the ball down the field in any art. This is not an explanation. This short story is very brief. This short story is light on detail. This short story does not hold your hand one bit. What are you supposed to get out of this short story? See, this is the thing for me about literature. And this is the thing for me that separates literature from propaganda. I have what I guess is a much different definition of art and propaganda than many people. Every time I talk about it, someone takes exception. If you have written a poem, a short story, a novel, anything, and there is a definitive reaction intended for your reader, there is an intended interpretation to that piece, you have written propaganda. You have not written art. Art is that which is to be interpreted. This short story does zero hand-holding for the reader. So that's number one here. It's difficult for me to believe that this was not considered one of Hemingway's best until the last so often. I read this short story, and coming up the way I did with Hemingway, finding Hemingway in the 2009 area, which is almost already a decade, but it is impossible for me to conceive that Hemingway is not known for, or was not known for, this short story. But if you get, I have plenty of short story collections from prior to the 90s. I have several from the 70s, from the 80s. This short story is not in there. So it must be correct, what I've heard. Now, the next thing to talk about here, the operation. The operation in question in this short story is an abortion. He's trying to talk her into getting an abortion. That's almost undoubtedly true. The interpretation comes from why. The interpretation comes from, does it actually happen? The interpretation comes from, when does it happen? Where do they end this short story? What happens to Jig and the American afterwards? Here's the question, or the observation perhaps, that I have from this time reading through Hills Like White Elephants. To me, Jig does not read like a very mature character. Jig does not read like someone who would be looking forward to settling down and having a child and creating a world for that child, as opposed to Jig. In fact, the fact that she's pregnant and here trying 3 beers and an Anise del Toro doesn't sound like Jig is very into the idea of keeping the baby at all. Now, I don't know how early people knew that there were negative effects of alcohol on children. I imagine that's pretty deep knowledge. That knowledge goes back pretty far, but I don't know, right? The thing to me about this short story that becomes more and more apparent each time I read it is not that Jig is opposed to the idea of the abortion. It's that Jig is opposed to the idea that the American wants her to have the abortion definitely. That seems to be the slap in the face. That seems to be the sticking point for Jig. The fact that this had to be, how assertive was the American when he was saying this? So, for example, personal story. I knew a woman and wanted to take this woman out, but she had had a boyfriend for a very long time. And eventually, she did not. We went to see a movie, and during the course of the evening, you kind of get the idea she's not into you, right? Okay, well, we figured that out. Fine. Then she wanted to text me. I think we should be friends. Yeah. No shit. It wasn't saying, okay, I don't think we could be in a relationship. That is the disappointing or insulting part. It's the fact you have to reassert it, right? The reason I tell that is because in this story, the way Jig is reacting is not as if she is opposed to the abortion. That's not the part that hurts her. It's the insinuation that he definitely wants her to have it, suggesting that he definitely does not want her to he definitely does not want to have that connection to her. That's sort of the feeling that I get from this short story, reading it through and through. The next thing I want to talk about is just how masterful Hemingway is. So they're having this argument. The girl looked at the bead curtain, put her hand out, and took hold of the 2 strings of beads. And you think we'll be all right and happy. I know we will. You don't have to be afraid. I've known lots of people who have done it. So have I, said the girl, and afterwards they were all so happy. Well, the man said, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. I wouldn't have you do it if you didn't want to. But I know it's perfectly simple. I can't stress to you how difficult it is to write sarcasm and to write sarcasm effectively and to write sarcasm effectively without ever telling your reader that it's sarcasm. That, and the reason I don't have this in the writer's corner portion of this video is that we have to simply marvel at that ability from Hemingway. The fact, look, we don't even have to have the retort from the American in order to know that it's sarcasm. I know, and you think we'll be all right and be happy. I know we will. You don't have to be afraid. I've known lots of people who've done it. So have I, said the girl, and afterward they were all so happy. You can read that without even having the American's retort and know that it's sarcasm. And part of the pushback against this short story, why it was not as anthologized as possibly it should have been, why it was not as closely known in the Hemingway canon as definitely it should have been, is that people seem to not really get the sarcasm. If you're just reading these characters as flat, if you were reading the sarcasm on the page without inflected tones, if you were reading this short story not bringing your real-world knowledge of people and talking into it, it's very boring. You have no idea what's going on. You have no idea how much these characters do or do not like each other. Everything that is coming out of this short story is something that you bring into this short story. And it's just phenomenal how that works. The next thing I want to talk about here, who is she? Who is Jig? Here's the weird thing about this that is easy to overlook. So the short story is introduced with the girl and the American. From that, I think it's possible to really understand that she is not American. He is. He's introduced as the American. So she's not American. Well, we're here in Spain. Maybe she's a Spanish girl. Except that she's definitely not Spanish. How do we know that? On the final page of the short story, she's asking him to stop talking. But I don't want you to, he said. I don't care anything about it. I'll scream, the girl said. The woman came out through the curtains with 2 glasses of beer and put them down on damp felt pads. The train comes in 5 minutes, she said. What did she say? asked the girl. Now, maybe it's because everything is too loud and she can't hear the waitress, the bartender. Maybe. We don't really have any reason to believe that. The trains are not there, the trains are on their way. So when this girl asks for what it is that the bartender said, she's asking for a translation. So here she is with the American in Spain, doesn't speak Spanish, is not American. Where is Jig from? Jig is probably not European because so many Europeans know at least bits of other languages. Jig might be from England, which is technically European, but it's not on. It's not on the. It is an island. It is not connected to quote unquote Greater Europe. So that just makes me wonder: who is Jig? Where are we coming from? And in that way, Jig is still very powerless in the situation. Right? If she's in a foreign land with a foreign person and she is being more or less forced into this operation, and where are they going? Are they going somewhere to have that done? Is that where they're going right now? I don't know what the laws would have been in Spain in the 1920s where we are assuming this is set. Probably it was illegal. So, the last thing that I want to talk about on the literary side is this. You need to listen to me very closely here. This is the last line of this. This is the last two lines. I'll read the last two lines from this short story. Do you feel better? He asked. I feel fine, she said. There's nothing wrong with me. I feel fine. Now, I've seen the numbers on this channel. I've seen the demographics for this channel. I've seen the demographics for the Hemingway videos. Probably, if you were watching this video, you were a male. I'm going to interpret something here for you. I'm going to give you this life lesson. If a woman, and I understand that we are in the age where you cannot make gendered statements, you cannot say women do this, you cannot say men have that. If a woman tells you she's fine, she is lying to you. If a woman says, I feel fine, I am fine, it is fine, that's fine. You get me? Okay. Writer's Corner. The first thing to talk about here is this. This short story is less than 1,500 words. Less than 1,500 words, and we could have conversations all day about what this short story says, what this short story means, who the characters in here are, what it is they're really talking about. We could have all sorts of discussions about those white elephants mentioned at the beginning. Why elephants? Why white elephants? Why hills? Why Spain? Why Jig? Why the American? Why Anis del Toro? Why talk about a bull? We could have discussions about a million things in this short story. There's economy. There is great economy with the words in this short story. Anything that you don't have to be given, you definitely aren't given. Some of the things that would help you, you are definitely not given. That is the master, Ernest Hemingway, at work. This is Ernest Hemingway saying, I trust you. I will put those words on the page that have to be there. Whose inner dialogue do you get? I defy you. Show me a single word in this short story that does not have to be there. And by does not have to be there, what I mean is, if you delete a single word from this short story, so much changes. So much is different. One word in this short story. The next thing I want to talk about is the fourth dimension. The way time is used in this short story is very interesting. That is something we do not always get an insight for in literature. Very difficult to tell the passage of time, and it's very difficult here to tell the passage of time. But we have it. There are hallmarks, and I can tell you about them. So we have this little bit of dialogue, and there are two passages of time in it. Do you want it with water? I don't know, the girl said. Is it good with water? It's all right. You want them with water? Asked the woman. Yes, with water. It tastes like licorice, the girl said, and put her glass down. Did you notice that? Between yes with water and it tastes like licorice, the bartender has retreated, gotten the anise del toro, gotten the water, returned with them, and both of these characters have ostensibly finished their first beer and started drinking the anise del toro. There is passage of time between the lines, yes with water, and it tastes like licorice. Now, there's something that tells you. During that time, there was no dialogue, meaning these two people were sitting there in silence. What does that tell you about these characters? What does this tell you about their situation? What does this tell you about how much they like each other? Hemingway is even able to tell us about these characters when there is no dialogue. Later in that same bit of exchange there, should we have another drink? All right. The warm wind blew the beaded curtain against the table. The beer's nice and cool, the man said. It's lovely, the girl said. Did you catch it? Should we have another drink? All right. The warm wind blew the bead curtain against the table. There's a time gap. The beer's nice and cool, the man said. So every time there is a pause in the short story, what picks up the conversation again is liquor. All we do is look at things and try new drinks. That is a brilliant way to tell us about a character without saying anything about the character. Now, the last talking point here. Dialogue is not about what a character says. It's about what a character wants. The beer's nice and cool, the man said. It's lovely, the girl said. It's really an awful simple operation, Jig. The man changing that subject to the abortion means that he can't let his mind rest. Now, you don't get that just from the words, it really is a simple operation. You have to have the context of the conversation where he says, oh, the beer's nice and cool. Oh, it's lovely. Hey, about that thing we've been talking about. You know exactly why he's changing that subject. That is what he wants. Here we go. And if I do it, you'll be happy and things will be like they were and you'll love me. That's not what she wants. That's what she says. She does not believe that is any longer possible. But okay. I love you now. You know I love you. That's not what he wants. What he wants is for her to get the abortion. That's why he's saying, anything you want, babe. I love you now. You know I love you now. I know. But if I do it, then it will be nice again. And if I say things like white elephants and you'll like it, that's not what she wants. She wants to be special. She wants to have attention. She wants to be the apple of his eye. She knows, because of this circumstance, that is not true. But she says this anyway. I'll love it. I love it now, but I just can't think about it. You know how I get when I worry. If I do it, you won't ever worry. I won't worry about that because it's perfectly simple. Then I'll do it because I don't care about me. What do you mean? I don't care about me. Well, I care about you. Oh, yes, but I don't care about me. And I'll do it, and then everything will be fine. Do you believe a single word either of those characters is saying during that stretch? It's not about what they say, it's about what they want. This short story is a masterclass in that principle of writing dialogue. That is all I have for this short story discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. There's poetry every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.